Section 12 of the Public Orations of Demosthenes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Public Orations of Demosthenes, translated by Arthur Wallace Pickard. On the Embassy, Part 2. And now, since I have been led on to this subject, I desire to describe to you, before everything else, the way in which they took the Phocian question entirely out of your hands. And let none of you, gentlemen of the jury, when he looks at the magnitude of the transactions, imagine that the crimes with which the defendant is charged are on a grander scale than one of his reputation could compass. You have rather to observe that any one whom you would have placed in such a position as this, a position in which, as each critical moment arrived, the decision would be in his hands, could have brought about disasters equal to those for which Aeschines is responsible, if, like Aeschines, he had wished to sell his services and to cheat and deceive you. For however contemptible may be the men whom you frequently employ in the public service, it does not follow that the part which the world expects this city to play is a contemptible one. Far from it. And further, though it was Philip, of course, who destroyed the Phocian people, it was Aeschines and his party who seconded Philip's efforts. And so what you have to observe and consider is whether, so far as the preservation of the Phocians came within the scope of their mission, these men deliberately destroyed and ruined that whole cause. You have not to suppose that Aeschines ruined the Phocians by himself. How could he have done so? To the clerk. Now give me the draft resolution which the council passed in view of my report, and the deposition of the clerk who wrote it. To the jury. For I would have you know that I am not repudiating today transactions about which I held my peace at the time, but that I denounced them at once, with full prevision of what must follow, and that the council, which was not prevented from hearing the truth from me, neither voted thanks to the ambassadors, nor thought fit to invite them to the town hall. From the foundation of the city to this day, no body of ambassadors is recorded to have been treated so, nor even Timagoras, whom the people condemned to death. But these men have been so treated. To the clerk. First read them the deposition, and then the resolution. The deposition and resolutions are read. Here is no expression of thanks, no invitation of the ambassadors to the town hall by the council. If Aeschines asserts that there is any, let him point it out and produce it, and I give way to him. But there is none. Now, on the assumption that we all fulfilled our mission in the same way, the council had good reason not to thank any of us, for the transactions of all alike were in that case atrocious. But if some of us acted uprightly, while others did the reverse, it must, it seems, have been owing to the knavery of their colleagues that the virtues were forced to take their share of this dishonour. How, then, can you all ascertain without any difficulty who is the rogue? Recall to your minds who it is that has denounced the transaction from the outset. For it is plain that it must have been the guilty person who was well content to be silent, to stave off the day of reckoning for the moment, and to take care for the future not to present himself to give an account of his actions. While it must have been he whose conscience was clear to whom there occurred the thought of the danger, lest through keeping silence he might be regarded as a partner in such atrocious villainy. Now it is I that have denounced these men from the outset, while none of them has accused me. Such then was the resolution of the council. The meeting of the assembly took place when Philip was already at Thermopylae. For this was the first of all their crimes, that they placed Philip in command of the situation, so that when you ought first to have heard the facts, then to have deliberated, and afterwards to have taken such measures as you had resolved upon, you in fact heard nothing until he was on the spot, and it was no longer easy to say what steps you ought to take. In addition to this, no one read the resolution of the council to the people, and the people never heard it. But Aeschines rose and delivered the harangue which I just now described to you, recounting the numerous and important benefits which he said he had, before his return, persuaded Philip to grant, and on account of which the Thebans had set a price upon his head. In consequence of these, appalled though you were at first at the proximity of Philip, and angry with these men for not having warned you of it, you became as mild as possible, having now formed the expectation that all your wishes would be realized, and you would not hear a word from me or from anyone else. After this was read the letter from Philip, which Aeschines had written when we had left him behind, a letter which was nothing less than a direct and express defence in writing of the misconduct of the ambassadors. For in it is stated that Philip himself prevented them, when they were anxious to go to the several cities and receive the oaths, and that he retained them in order that they might help him to effect a reconciliation between the peoples of Halus and Pharsalus. He takes upon his own shoulders the whole of their misconduct, and makes it his own. But as to the Phocians and Thespiae, and the promises contained in Aeschines' report to you, why, there is not the slightest mention of them. And it was no mere accident that the proceedings took this form. For the failure of the ambassadors to carry out or give effect to any of the instructions imposed upon them by your resolution, the failure for which you were bound to punish them, Philip makes himself responsible in their stead, and says that the fault was his, for you were not likely, of course, to be able to punish him. But the points in regard to which Philip wished to deceive you and to steal a march upon the city were made the subject of the defendant's report, in order that you might be able to find no ground of accusation or reproach against Philip, since these points were not mentioned either in his letter or in any other part of the communications received from him. But to the clerk, read the jury the actual letter written by Aeschines sent by Philip, and to the jury, do you observe that it is such as I have described? To the clerk, read on. The letter is read. You hear the letter, men of Athens, you hear how noble and generous it is, but about the Phocians or the Thebans or the other subjects of the defendant's report, not a syllable. Indeed, in this letter there is not an honest word, as you will very shortly see for yourselves. He says that he retained the ambassadors to help him reconcile the people of Halus, and such is the reconciliation that they have obtained, that they are exiles from their country, and their city is laid waste. And as to the prisoners, though he professed to be wondering what he could do to gratify you, he says that the idea of procuring their release had not occurred to anyone. But evidence has, as you know, been laid before you many times in the assembly, to the effect that I myself went to ransom them, taking a talent for the purpose, and it shall now be laid before you once more. It follows, therefore, that it was to deprive me of my laudable ambition that Aeschines persuaded Philip to insert this statement. But the strongest point of all is this. In his former letter, the letter which we brought back, he wrote, quote, I should have mentioned expressly the great benefits that I propose to confer upon you, if I felt sure that you would grant me the alliance as well. End quote. And yet, when the alliance has been granted, he says that he does not know what he can do to gratify you. He does not even know what he had himself promised. Why, he must obviously have known that, unless he was trying to cheat you. To prove that he did write thus and in these terms, to the clerk, take his former letter and read the very passage beginning at this point. Read on. An extract from the letter is read. Thus, before he obtained the peace, he undertook to set down in writing the great benefits he would confer on the city in the event of an alliance also being granted him. But as soon as he had obtained both his wishes, he says that he does not know what he can do to gratify you, but that if you will inform him, he will do anything that will not involve any disgrace or stigma upon himself. Such are the excuses in which he takes refuge to secure his retreat in case you should actually make any suggestion or should be induced to ask any favor. It would have been possible to expose this whole proceeding at the time, and a great deal more, without delay, to inform you of the facts, and to prevent you from sacrificing your cause, had not the thought of Thespiae and Platae, and the idea that the Thebans were on the very point of paying the penalty, robbed you of the truth. While, however, there was good reason for mentioning these prospects, if the city was to hear of them and then be cheated, it would have been better, if their realization was actually intended, that nothing should have been said about them. For if matters had already reached a stage at which the Thebans would be no better off, even if they received the design against them, why was the design not fulfilled? But if its fulfilment was prevented because they received it in time, who was it that betrayed the secret? Must it not have been Aeschines? Its fulfilment, however, was not in fact intended, nor did the defendant either desire or expect it, so that he may be relieved of the charge of betraying the secret. What was intended was that you should be hoodwinked by these statements, and should refuse to hear the truth from me, that you should not stir from home, and that such a decree should carry the day as would involve the destruction of the Phocians. Hence this prodigality in promises and their proclamation in his speech to the people. When I heard Aeschines making all these magnificent promises, I knew perfectly well that he was lying, and I will tell you how I knew. I knew it first because when Philip was about to take the oath in ratification of the peace, the Phocians were openly excluded from it. This was a point which it would have been natural to pass over in silence if the Phocians were really to be saved. And secondly, I knew it because the promises were not made by Philip's ambassadors or in Philip's letter, but by the defendant. Accordingly, drawing my conclusions from these facts, I rose and came forward and attempted to contradict him. But as you were not willing to hear me, I held my peace, with no more than these words of solemn protest, which I entreat you in heaven's name to remember. I have no knowledge of these promises, I said, and no share in making them, and I added, I do not believe they will be fulfilled. This last expression roused your temper, and I proceeded, Take care, men of Athens, that if any of these things comes to pass, you thank these gentlemen for it, and give your honours and crowns to them, and not to me. If, however, anything of an opposite character occurs, you must equally vent your anger on them. I decline all responsibility. No, no, interrupted Aeschines, do not decline responsibility now. Take care rather that you do not claim credit when the time comes. Indeed, it would be an injustice if I did so, I replied. Then Philocrates arose with a most insolent air and said, It is no wonder, men of Athens, that I and Demosthenes should disagree, for he drinks water, I drink wine. And you laughed. End of section 12.